Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a special guest here with us today. This is our first interview on the Dividend Stockpile channel. We have Colby, better known as the DGI Crab. Colby, welcome.
Hey, Jeremy, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming. Really looking forward to our discussion today. So for those who don't know, Colby runs a YouTube channel called the DGI Crab, has excellent content on there, and that's where I was first introduced to Colby. Just love the work you're doing, love the videos you're putting out, and I've been subscribed for a little bit over a month now, and you just keep cranking out awesome videos. And so I said I want to get you on the channel to talk about kind of your strategy, what you do in investing, a little bit about you yourself, and share this community. There's so many great YouTube people out there and great investors and great community. So I want to give everyone a voice and get to know people and share a message, if you will, with the larger population. So again, thank you so much for coming on. All right, so I guess the first thing, go and introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, my name is Colby, the DGI Crab, and I haven't been at this whole YouTube game for very long. The channel launched on June 21st of this year, so still haven't even hit that 60-day mark just yet. But and it's been a blast so far. My whole philosophy is I just kind of make content for me, the kind of content that I'd like to see, and that was really kind of the genesis of the channel. And I primarily focus on the age and time horizon of the investor, which I thought was something that a lot of the channels would sort of talk about here and there, but it didn't really feel like it was as big of a focus as I thought that it should. And so I felt like that was maybe a niche within the dividend investing community here on YouTube that I could kind of fill.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love it. We'll talk more in detail about that strategy and, how investing is different depending on your age and your timeline. So I've had a couple of videos in the past where I kind of talk about similar topics where, if you have a long time frame, you can approach dividend investing differently than if you only have 5 years until you need the money or if you're in retirement. So your message and your approach definitely resonates. And I think it's good to put it out there and see a different approach, if you will. So awesome. So talk to us about kind of your background. How did you guys kind of get started investing, and how long did it take you to become a DGI investor? And kind of give us a background.
Sure. Well, I guess I really started investing and really started paying attention to the stock market late 2016, early 2017. And like most early on investors, I really didn't know that much what I was doing. If I bought a stock, there wasn't a lot of rhyme or reason to it. If I sold a stock, kind of the same thing. It was usually maybe because I made some money on it and I was excited, or it crashed and I was frustrated. So that was, there's probably about a year or so of that, and just reading about, different methods and things like that were out there. And I got kind of turned on to the idea of dividend growth investing because I'd gotten myself to a point where I'd cleaned up my consumer debt. I'm a fan of Dave Ramsey in a lot of regards, so I wanted to get a lot of my debt cleaned up before I started at the time what I thought was gambling within the market with my extra money.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to the point where I had enough money that I could start investing like really regularly, a friend of mine who's very big into real estate investing, has several rental properties here in the area, was really kind of trying to get me to go down that path. Well, I don't know about you, but I can't fix anything. If it's more complicated than screwing in a light bulb, there's not much that I can do about it. So, if I was a landlord, I'd be pawning that off on like a property management company to deal with that. That kind of cuts into those profits. And I remember going and looking at some rental properties with this friend, and spotted a house that was pretty cheap. It was something that I could afford a reasonable down payment on. And I decided before I did that, I'd call my dad, who's an accountant, pretty good with money, just to kind of get his feedback on it. And he said, "Why don't you just buy stocks?"
Mm-hmm.
He didn't tell me anything about what stocks to buy or what strategy or anything like that. It was just more like, look, you don't have a huge pile of money, so why don't you go into the stock market instead? And then just continued to do a lot of reading, watched a lot of YouTube content, read a lot of articles, and ultimately landed on dividend growth investing as my preferred strategy because I wanted that cash flow. I wanted the passive income, but I, certainly didn't want to be a property manager.
Hmm.
So that was sort of the genesis of where I landed on this particular style of investing.
Absolutely. So based on that timeline, you're coming up to 7 or 8 years of really focusing on DGI. Nice.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I've been investing for about 25 years myself, but throughout those years, went everything from index funds to growth investing to penny stocks to everything in between. So um,
Yep.
through all the crashes and all the ups and downs, kind of find out that my personal investing style is a little bit more conservative than others, and so DGI really falls into what feels comfortable with for my risk tolerances. My goals in life is to live off the dividends and pass the money on to the children once I'm gone or charities. So DGI was my approach as well. So obviously you're mostly a DGI investor, but do you have any other type of investments that aren't dividend growth?
I invest $35 a month into Bitcoin.
Okay.
That's about it.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
about it. I don't hold any non-paying dividend stocks in my portfolio. I do have a position in SCHG,
Mhm.
which is more of a growth-centered ETF, a lot of tech. I've had that for, gosh, more than 5 years now. I don't think I've added anything to it in a long time. I'm way up. It's it's been a really nice kind of long-term hold, but
Yeah.
no, typically if it doesn't pay a dividend, I'm not particularly interested in it.
Yeah, that's definitely the approach I'm taking. So some of my more growthy names like Microsoft and things like that,
Mhm.
they do pay a dividend, but the majority of what I expect from that is the capital appreciation. But I
Right.
still look for a company that does pay a dividend. My personal goal is a higher dividend yield. That's what I'm focused on because my timeline is a little shorter than some others, but you still need some growth in your portfolio as well. So things like ASML, Microsoft, Visa, things like that, low dividend payers today, but they're going to grow over time, mixing that in a little bit. So since you're doing DGI, kind of what's your end game? Like, what's your goal of your money?
Well, ultimately, I would like to retire off of the dividend income that I receive, and I'm still in my early 40s, so I've got a little bit of time left to go before I've built that portfolio up to the point where I'd feel comfortable with not working. Fortunately, I have a job that I really enjoy, so I'm not in a huge hurry to get out of the job market just yet. But I have said that my current employer is going to be the last boss that I
Nice.
ever have.
Mhm.
And I think the idea for me is that even if I get to the point where I've got close to enough money coming in every year in dividends to retire, but maybe not quite enough just yet, that's still a pretty good place to be in. That gives me options
Mhm.
for what type of work that I would do in the interim. And it wouldn't necessarily be just all about taking a job like just for the money, just to pay the bills. So I like that flexibility. But ultimately, I would like to live off of my dividend income primarily over the long term, and that's why the growth aspect's so important. You've got to be able to keep up with inflation when you're at that point where you're not reinvesting the dividend income you receive. You've still got to be able to get some sort of a raise in your pay if you're not doing that. So while I'll probably have a few things in the portfolio that pay a high yield but offer a little growth, I want the majority of it to be something that grows quite a bit. I want that portfolio overall to be growing about 7 to 9% at least every year,
Mhm.
whether I'm reinvesting the dividends or not.
Yeah, that's a great target, and I think that's a reasonable expectation across the universe of dividend stocks is that 7 to 9% growth. Obviously, you're going to have some that are 20% a year, but you're also going to have some that are 3% a year. But if you can balance them out and find the right mix, you can definitely hit those targets. Not a problem. So, just kind of thinking about the dates and everything, it sounds like you started investing in your mid to early 30s.
Mhm.
So a lot of people have this awakening moment, if you will, when it comes to money, whether it's a traumatic event when you're a child or, things that your parents did while you were growing up that really influence your money habits. what would you say is do you have a aha moment when you were younger that, kind of set you in the path that you took in life when it comes to your finances?
Uh, I wouldn't necessarily say that. My parents didn't talk to me a ton about finances growing up. We certainly weren't poor. We certainly weren't rich. It was just kind of classic middle class upbringing. My dad was an accountant. My mom became a nurse when I was about 10 or 11 years old. Prior to that, she was a housekeeper
Mhm.
and just kind of did odd jobs here and there. And I was always very, very interested in money, but didn't have a ton of lessons growing up from them other than outside of your mortgage, you really should try to avoid debt at all costs because it just eats away at the money that you make every week. Don't buy things that you can't afford. Um, and uh, um, and I definitely enjoyed like money themed games when I was a kid. And I was a big role playing game fan. So like I like to play things like Final Fantasies and games like that, and that actually taught me a lot about money, like the concept of, hey, you want better equipment, you want better weapons, that kind of thing. You got to go grind and go make it.
Yeah,
And if you're able to do that, then your path forward in the rest of the game is going to be a lot easier than if you don't. So those were kind of some things that I learned growing up was debt was bad, and if you've got to go and work for your money, but then if you use it correctly, you'll have an easier path.
absolutely. That's so funny that you bring up Final Fantasy because that was my childhood. That was my teenager years, is playing Final Fantasy for hours after school and things like that. So um,
Yep.
that's funny that you have that same background. So my personal money story is when I was growing up, my parents lived way beyond their means, and while my dad was working, he was able to get some overtime, and they built their lifestyle around that extra money based on the overtime. Then all of a sudden the company comes and says no more overtime. So his income got cut like 30% pretty much overnight. And so
Mm-hmm.
when you build your life to the limit of your budget, you don't have any excess. When major things like that happen, it's all downhill. So that was my teenage years. It started getting really rough as a family, and so that really influenced, the way I approach finances going forward. I'm very frugal, very conservative, save my money, invest my money. I never want to be in a situation where a loss of a job or medical or something like that derails me completely. So that's kind of where I am at now. So awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that background. So I wanted to kind of transition over to talking a little bit about your channel and kind of how you started it, what it's all about, give the audience kind of a background on what you do. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to pull up your channel. For anyone that's out there, definitely go take a look at the DGI Crab on YouTube. But Colby, I'll let you kind of talk through kind of what your channel is all about.
Sure. Well, this is like I said, the main portion of the strategy for the channel is all about your age and your time horizon. So when I was doing the prep work, I was doing prep work for the channel for about 3 months before actually launching it. And I knew that what I wanted to do was to have an age themed channel. And the goal was to have a smaller group of stocks for each age range to zero in on and focus on, because one thing that I think that people will find if you're watching a lot of different content on YouTube, there's so many quality dividend channels out there right now. And you watch somebody like Ryan Williams, and Ryan's got a great idea for a stock to buy, and then you watch the dividend diplomats who are a major impact on me, and they're buying another stock, and then you watch Dividend Bull, and then he's got something he's buying. And if you're just kind of following along with all of that and buying stuff when people like, with their channels are buying things, great channels, these guys are usually right like 7 or 8 times out of 10. And they got a good high batting average. But what you'll eventually find yourself with is you're going to have a portfolio of like 80 or 90 small positions, and it kind of gets hard to keep track of that. So the thought process for me was, you have a portfolio where you dollar cost average into some ETFs, and use about 50% of your money on that. And then you're picking single stocks from a smaller group of stocks that are appropriate for your age range and your timeline. So I started out with about 250-ish stocks on a spreadsheet that I thought could be good enough to make the cut. finally got that whittled down to about 60 and felt like that was about the right number. So each age tier has a subset of stocks. It's tier 1 is 18 to 30, tier 2 is 31 to 41, tier 3 42 to 53, and tier 4 is 54 and up. So I have got a playlist there for each of the 4 tiers. I think I linked that in just about every video that I've got, just so people kind of understand thematically like what we're going with. And depending on what your age is, watch that video and I'll explain why each of the stocks that are in that tier made the cut, just some key stats about them, like their dividend payout history, their kind of expected annual growth rate, and just why I like each of those individual companies. Most of them are wide moat companies, not anything very sexy, sleep well at night sort of companies, where if there is a dividend cut from any of them, it's going to be a major surprise. It'll be like headline news, right? Like if Visa cuts its dividend at some point for whatever reason, like that'll be front page stock market news. And I think all 60 of them kind of have that same sort of expectation, where maybe year in and year out there will be larger growth than others, but for the most part they're pretty predictable. You kind of know what you're going to get.
Yeah, that's what really appealed to me to what your approach is the quality of the companies that are on your list. And having 15 individual names plus a couple of ETFs is more than enough diversity for your portfolio. So you can really focus in on those 10 or 15 top quality names to build out those individual positions, while you still have the ETF as kind of your background or your backstop. You don't have to think about so much. So yeah, I think the first video I watched on your channel was the breakdown of the 4 different tiers. And I thought it was just an excellent approach, both to dividend investing as well as the YouTube channel, to your point, focusing on specific names, really digging into those, talking about it over the years, how they've changed, how they've grown. I really appreciate that. So now, obviously, you only have the channel for, what, a month and a half or so, 2 months, and you're putting out tons of videos, so that's really awesome. Has your 60 stocks changed since you did your initial research, or are they all pretty much stayed the same from when you started?
They've stayed the same up to this point, and I hope that they do for the long haul. I really did not want to launch the channel and then within 2 or 3 weeks have a stock that had a dividend cut and just immediately have to start reshuffling things. So I was very particular when I put those lists together, in part because just to kind of protect my own credibility. And I certainly don't want anyone to be upset because they started investing in something because they thought that I had some great idea. I'm not a professional advisor, so do your own due diligence always, but I'm also not naive enough to know that if I'm producing content, then there will be some people that watch it and think, oh, that's a good idea, I'm going to go invest in that company. Then 2 weeks later, they'd slashed their dividend and they think, well, this guy said he put together the 60 best companies that he could find, and he already swung and missed on one of them. So I was very careful about that. Now I do have a sort of a secondary playlist, you'll see down there on the bottom left, called the bubble stocks. And that was another group, or another 40 stocks that were extremely difficult to eliminate. You start with 250, you can kind of cut out about 100, 120 of them fairly easily. And then at around that 100 stock market started getting a lot tougher to decide who wasn't going to make the cut. So I broke those into 4 separate tiers as well. So that way, if you're watching the content and you're saying, yeah, I like most of his tier 1 stocks, but there's a few where it's like, how in the world did he leave that company out? Well, hey, go check out the bubble stock list. Maybe there's something in there that you like more. Like MasterCard is one of the stocks in the tier 1 that was on the bubble. And the only reason that I can give for why MasterCard didn't make the top 60 was I was really choosing between them and Visa, and which one I thought was better. And Visa got the edge slightly over MasterCard. But if I have to remove one of those 60, then odds are one of these 40 in the bubble stock playlist will step in and be the replacement.
That's awesome. It sounds like you've definitely done your research and you've really identified companies that you feel like can be held for the long run. Obviously anything can happen. And to your point, neither of us are financial advisors, but based on the history, based on the financial metrics of the companies on your list, there's a pretty good chance that, there'll be stable growing companies for a long time coming. But, there's always the situations. And that's one good reason why not to put too much of your money in any one individual stock. Things can happen. But if you have ETFs as your base, 15 individual companies, if we forbid had one cut, your overall income level would not change significantly as long as you're fully diversified. So a couple more questions about the channel. So where does the DGI Crab come from? How did you come up with a crab as your mascot?
Well, my nickname at my office is the Crab, because I'm kind of crabby by nature, and one of the things that I'm sort of responsible for in my position is that if we have a client that is behind on their payments, usually I'm the person that they sick on that client to get them current, and people will joke and they'll just say, "Oh, sick the crab on them." And my friends that watch the channel, the main criticism they have of it is they say you're so friendly on your channel. The tone's so friendly, you're not crabby enough. So maybe I'll have some crabbier content a little bit later on. But this first 6 to 8 weeks, I've been primarily focused on building up some quality playlists, and giving some people some things to think about, some things to focus on that are easy to listen to, where they don't feel like I'm just sitting there griping at them and griping about the market or why their investing strategy is wrong or whatever, right? I don't necessarily want to come off that way in the early stages, but maybe there will be some crabbier content in the future.
Maybe you can do a stocks to not invest in and just tear them apart a little bit and tell them
Oh,
why.
I've got a list of those,
Okay.
definitely. So
Yeah.
that may be something in the future.
There you go. So obviously you're building out your playlist. You're doing a great job. You're putting out videos on the regular. Kind of what's your vision for the next couple of weeks or months with your channel? Anything big coming up that you want to kind of plug?
Well, I've been doing 6 videos a week every day but Sunday. I may eventually scale that back down to 5, just because I don't want to put out content just for the sake of putting out content. I do still have quite a few things prepared, but some of the consistent things that people will see out of the channel is at the end of the market on Friday. I do go over on my spreadsheet that I keep each of the 4 tiers at the end of the week, and we'll just kind of look at where did these stocks wind up, which ones are looking like good values right now based on my metrics, and just to kind of maybe help people formulate a plan, even if they don't watch the video on Friday, check it out sometime over the weekend, before Monday morning, and could maybe give you some ideas of some things to look for in your own investing. On Saturdays, I typically will do a video to announce any dividend increases that have taken place in the group of 60 stocks. So far, every Saturday, I've gotten to do one of those videos. Really excited about that. I just found out today American States Water has increased their dividend by 8-ish%. So I know on Saturday I'll be going over that. And then every other Tuesday, I'm doing a series regarding dividend paying ETFs, where I'm investing $5 a week into 8 different ETFs on the SoFi platform. And the idea of that is just to show that even if you don't have a ton of extra money to invest, you don't need a lot of money or a lot of knowledge. You can just pick some ETFs and watch them go. So every other Tuesday, I'll be doing an update on that little portfolio. I call it the Great ETF Race. And we'll just be doing check-ins on that and watch it grow over the week. So definitely just some regular planned content that's coming out. And then the other days of the week will maybe be a little bit random, but still lots of content planned. I'm certainly not running out of ideas yet.
Yeah, that's awesome. So obviously we're both on YouTube trying to, build our channels and have an audience. And, there's times where you feel like you have a ton of ideas, and then you have those times where it's really a struggle to find it. So it's good to keep, ideas, on the list of upcoming things so that you always have something to focus on. So for those out there that might be interested in starting a channel, do you have any kind of thoughts or recommendations based on your initial impressions of being on YouTube?
So far, I'd just say if you're going to start a channel on something, just make the kind of content you want to see. That's really about all it comes down to. I've definitely done some research on like how to build your thumbnails or what to do or not do to grow your channel and some things like that. And while I think that things like, SEO and all of that are, it's important. I wouldn't necessarily ignore that, especially if your goal is to try to make money off of your channel. But for me, this is not about making money. I'd love to eventually get monetized. I'm sure that if I'm on YouTube putting out content long enough, I will be. But this is not a money making venture for me at all. This is for me just more about my area of expertise, I guess. I think I'm pretty good at this, and I just wanted to share that knowledge. And again, just make the kind of content that I would want to see, that I would enjoy listening to or watching.
Mhm.
And so long as you're doing that and you're enjoying it and you're having fun, I'd say, just everything else I think will fall into place eventually. If you're just in it for the money, I think that you're probably going to quit pretty fast, because you don't just get 1,000+ subscribers overnight doing most things, I wouldn't think. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That's good advice. Yeah, it's so hard in the beginning getting things started, but you just have to be consistent. Follow your own approach. Don't try and mimic or copy, other creators out there. We all have a unique voice and a unique approach to investing. So to your point, be you and put yourself out there and see what happens. The worst that's going to happen is a video goes there and it doesn't get any views. But other than that, you got to put yourself out there and try it. So awesome. Well, thank you for that. So everyone that's out there, definitely go out to YouTube, go to the DGI Crab, subscribe, watch some videos, like all that stuff that you're supposed to do. Help Colby out on his channel. So thank you for sharing that. So I want to kind of transition over to a little bit of just kind of your personal side of things. So do you happen to have an individual stock that's what you would say is your favorite, or maybe a few that are your favorites?
well, I did do a video on my 10 favorites.
Okay.
So my 10 favorite stocks. If I had to narrow it down to one, I mean, that's a really tough choice. I'm very partial to McDonald's.
Okay.
I kind of lovingly refer to McDonald's as my favorite REIT.
Yep.
It's a backdoor real estate play. If anyone hasn't watched The Founder, a great movie with Michael Keaton, you'll learn that the idea with McDonald's is it's not about the burgers. It's not
Hmm.
about the nuggies, man. It's about that land underneath each of the restaurants that they own.
Hmm.
Uh, for people that aren't familiar with it, if you've got a bunch of REITs in your regular brokerage account, those dividends get taxed as ordinary income. McDonald's dividends do not.
Yep.
So if you want to own some real estate in your portfolio and get the tax advantages of a non-real estate stock, technically, McDonald's is a great play. Global
Yeah.
company. I don't think they're going anywhere.
Yeah.
And I don't see a lot of people talk about waste management,
Hmm.
to be honest with you, but we're talking about the largest trash collection and disposal company in the United States.
Yep.
I don't care what's going on in the world, who the president is, what's happening in the economy. We better hope somebody's collecting the trash week in and week out,
Yep.
and nobody does it more than them. So that's kind of a underrated stock that doesn't get a lot of play, but they're pretty high up on the list too for me.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Obviously trash is not sexy, if you will. It's not going to shoot to the moon like some of these other stocks are, but it's going to give you consistent returns. And as you said, it's an essential part of our lives. What I really like about waste management is their recycling and their green initiatives that they're working on. So it's not just dumping in a landfill; it's actually making something of the materials that they collect. So you're both providing a service and you're trying to come up with solutions for the future. So just real quick, what are your thoughts on the McDonald's earnings that just came through? Kind of seemed like they had some flat sales, over the last year. Any kind of thoughts or quick impressions?
I hope that their stock drops a little bit more so I can keep buying more of it.
There we go. That's the approach to take as a dividend investor for sure. So on the same vein, favorite ETF? Anything?
For my age range, I'd say it's probably VIG,
Okay.
Vanguard Dividend Appreciation ETF. There's there's a lot of good ones out there. SCHD is a monster.
Yep.
Can't argue against that. DGRO is another good one for people in that early 30s to early to mid 40s range, where you get a nice combination of yield plus growth. But VIG, I'm pretty partial to. I don't see any reason why the dividend payout on that's not going to just continue to go up by maybe 8% on the low end, 12-ish on the high end,
Mhm.
based on the way that it's structured. It's not sexy.
Yeah.
But it's not super exciting. Most of the time, you're going to get a yield a little under 2%, but it should just keep growing and growing and growing year in and year out.
Yeah, absolutely. It has definitely a good methodology. My favorite is SCHD, and followed by a DGRO. And then my third favorite is probably one called Devo, where they do a combination of dividend stocks and option
Yes.
trading. So those are my
Yep.
favorite. And then my favorite individual company is BlackRock, the investment management company. So
Yeah. That's a tier two. That's a
oh,
tier two
there you
stock on
go.
the channel.
I'm just
Just
a little,
waiting,
I'm just
waiting for them to be cheap. It's just they haven't been cheap enough for me to buy.
they definitely had a good return. I'm working on a separate video right now, and I think their annualized return is like 20% a year over the last 25 years. So it never seems cheap. I was
Yeah.
lucky to buy it a few years back at like sub 400, and now it's up in the 800s or something. So I would love to add more to it, but it's just grown so much over the years. It's hard to keep up with. But that's definitely my favorite. So what are your opinions on some of these option-based ETFs out there, like the JEPIs and the JEPQs and QQQI and so on?
You know, a lot of them I don't like. Devo's my favorite,
Hmm.
without question. You can't argue with the monthly yield that it produces. The share price is appreciated really nicely. And there's a book that I want to read about. I can't remember the name of the guy now, but I think it was the guy that basically founded that ETF, and his strategy. I'm blanking on it.
Yeah, it's Kevin Simpson is his name.
Kevin Simpson.
Yep,
Okay.
and it's Walk Towards Wealth. Is the name.
Walk Towards Wealth. That's exactly it. Yep. So
I have I
that's
have it right there on the bookshelf though.
awesome.
It's
Yep.
one of my favorites because obviously as a dividend investor and as an option seller, that's what I do. His book and his strategy fits in perfectly with my investing style, so I had to pick that book up, and I follow him on X and things like that. So yeah, Kevin does a really good job with Devo and all the other related ETFs that they have. So in your personal investing life,
Mhm.
outside of your channel and the research for that, how much time do you spend every week kind of on your investing practice, if you will?
Oh man, probably more than I should. I mean, I probably at least an hour a day, just kind of periodically checking the market, checking the spreadsheet. If something craters out of nowhere, I usually like to be able to maybe just swoop in, throw a little bit of money at it, because you never know how long something's going to be down.
Mhm.
But I'd guess probably anywhere from, maybe 12 to 15 hours a week, probably.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like it's almost become like a habit or, a pastime of mine to do market research. I don't
Yep.
necessarily trade every day, but I'm always involved. So you can certainly go down that rabbit hole, like it sounds like the two of us are, or you can keep it really simple and, just do your weekly buys, your monthly buys. It all depends on how involved you want to get. So, um, I'm addicted to investing, so I'm
Yep.
always checking something. So I guess with that, do you have any resources that you would recommend for dividend growth investors to do their research on?
I actually just dropped a video this morning where I talk about how I utilize Seeking Alpha and FinViz to,
Mhm.
and in that video, I'm mostly talking about specifically doing sector research and
Mhm.
just looking at how to look at sectors overall. Seeking Alpha is definitely my go-to as
Mhm.
far as doing the research on individual companies and ETFs. That's probably where I spend about 80% of my time doing research, and then the other 20 is a smattering of other sites as well as individual companies sites. In particular, if there's some news about the company, good or bad, I might go straight to the source and see what the company has to say about it.
Yeah, definitely two really good research sites. I follow both of them. I go on there pretty regularly as well. So good choices. So because it seems like we're both around the same age, what would you do? What would you recommend to someone who might just be started now and maybe in their early 40s, that hasn't invested yet or is really just getting started and they feel like they're behind? So just quickly, what do you recommend for them, or what's your guidance?
Definitely tell them it's not too late. So
Mhm.
don't kick yourself for not starting investing earlier. And I would, with any age range, I'd just say we've got to look at your timeline. and make some realistic goals for what it is that you're trying to achieve. And if you're a dividend growth stock investor and you're just getting started at age 40, I wouldn't necessarily say, well, don't ever buy something low yield, high growth like Visa. If Visa's ever cheap, you might get a little bit of it, just so you have some exposure to it. But you really ought to be focusing in on stuff that for that age range, you probably want a starting yield of at least 2.5%.
Mhm.
And you'll probably want to have an annual growth rate in the high single digits.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to do a bunch of research on the companies, if you're nervous about investing into individual companies, blue chip or otherwise, then pick out an ETF, or maybe 2 or 3 ETFs for that matter. If you like a few of them, I don't have any problem if somebody wants to say, well, I'm going to go VIG, SCHD, DIVO, and something else. I like VYMI for international investments. So, if you've got a handful of ETFs you want a dollar cost average into, that's great. But I just say keep in mind what your time horizon is and invest appropriately if you're doing DGI. If you're just going to do growth no matter what, then maybe you buy something like SCHG, dollar cost average into that, and hope that it continues to return 16% a year. That's not a terrible strategy either. But at some point, if you want to live off of dividends, you'll have to transfer that money into something that pays higher dividends than that. So do you want to learn about that now, or do you want to learn about it when you're in your 50s or early 60s and you're ready to retire? I'd rather kind of start learning about that now if I'm in my early 40s.
Absolutely. Great advice. All right. So let's go ahead and wrap up. Really appreciate you coming on. Everyone out there, definitely go check out his YouTube channel at the DGI Crab. Definitely take a look at some of the videos. Colby, thank you so much for coming on with us today. Really appreciate your time and your insights. And I look forward to, seeing you out there and watching more of your videos in the future. So really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Jeremy. I really appreciate you having me.
Awesome. Talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.